steel world out there, all you busy professionals in the supply chain of metals. LinkedIn, you can find us on the YouTube channel. It's where the events are posted on the LinkedIn portion of it. Then we also have a Zoom. If you registered and get a Zoom link there, we're also live on the Zoom information there. We will be following the chats in all three of those locations. So if you're interested in commenting or discussing anything in particular, we had a great discussion last week. Love to have that same type every week. Get involved in the weekly news of the supply chain of metals. And I guess with that, before we get started, what we're going to kind of go through here today is we're going to go through a brief, quick summary of kind of a recap of all the. Then I'll have some discussion questions that pop up if we haven't already talked about everything throughout the meeting here. So with that, let me bring in Scott Glenn, the other steel guy here, who's going to be live from sunny Northern California, way north.
Northern California today. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody, depending upon where you're at. Welcome. Looking forward to some good discussions here about the current supply chain of metals. Let's get to it, Jim.
Good day, as they say somewhere. Good day.
Good day.
Good day, huh? You do it better than I do. I've done those accents better. So anyway, a quick summary of the metal supply chain is facing a strategic positioning now requires agility, recycling, integration, and regional market insight. It's kind of the news from last week, and I guess that's been kind of a ongoing theme. It seems like most of that. And the one word that didn't pop up there was the part of that is you're starting to see the agreements come in for the critical minerals and things like that. And so the tariffs aren't as much of a. And I guess we're even going through in the U.S. here, the vote yesterday, and the Congress, again, some of the, both sides of the aisle, a little bit of one side is starting to lean the other way on the tariffs, but got to keep it, having a good insight on that. We're here to talk about that. Love to hear any opinions and thoughts on that out there. Again, we are live everywhere. We are monitoring the chats everywhere. Make sure that there's one little spot up here. There we go. Make sure that that's up and going there in the Zoom part of that. So anyway,
a couple of terms that you said are kind of have been in the headlines for the past several weeks is critical minerals, as you just expressed, and then the rare earth minerals, something that it seems to have popped into the headlines here a lot lately.
Pharmaceuticals back in COVID days, the U.S. was a strategic rare earth critical minerals, in our supply chain. We lost the production of several of our things in the COVID era. And I don't know, we went through, the years of trying to fix that, and then we went through a different administration, never heard anything about the supply chain of any of that. Now we're back in, 4 to 6 years later, and I don't know, did anything ever get solved, or did we just say it was a big issue and not worry about it after that? Did other issues become more important?
Great question. Question. That's, what's the hottest topic in the headline news, and some of that stuff gets put by the wayside and doesn't get brought up. I don't know what's going on. Good question, though.
Yeah, I'm tracking all the headlines of the day, the news, the talking points, the 24-hour news cycle that everybody talks about. It's we live off the 24-hour news cycle and put on more of the global business news instead of the political. The politics, but again, politics do get involved in so much of that you kind of have to pay some attention to it. But again, when does it get solved and when does it move on? I don't know. I don't have a checklist of all the things that are happening every day. Then did they ever get resolved, or they just talked about it for 24 hours and got our blood boiling and then off to the next thing, huh?
Yep, the little teasers. Yep.
How can I get your vote? So anyway, some of the key developments from the week, the global steel output was down, reported down to 141.8 million tons in September. So it was down 4.3% month over month, marking a fourth straight monthly decline. So I know that we did talk a little bit about that. The Chinese, as they're declining their steel output, they were increasing their iron ore importing.
Right, that's one of those headlines that kind of has gone by the wayside, and we haven't mentioned anything about that the past few weeks, but yet the Chinese steel production has continued to decrease, along with the world production.
Right, that's the next news point was the China's steel production. Right. The output fell greater than the overall. The global demand, it went down 5% month over month and 4.6 year over year to 73.49 million tons, signaling weak domestic construction and manufacturing demand is what was cited for that decline, or signaling anyway. So and then the third thing here we have is the rare earth diversification. Back to the rare earths, what's going on there. The U.S. EXIM Bank approved $200 million in financing for an Australian rare earth and minerals sands projects to reduce dependence on China. So I don't know why Australia, the U.S. Export-Import Bank. So I don't know how they tie that financing to. So I'm assuming that it's Australia's rare earth sands project, and it's being done by the Australians, not the U.S., but it's been financed by the EXIM Bank. But what does that do for our relation? What happens if there's a break in the diplomatic relations with Australia? What happens? I mean, they still have to pay back the loan, but do they have to sell the minerals to the U.S.?
Yeah, it's probably in the fine print of the agreement that's been negotiated, I would assume.
Again, assumption. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That was kind of that thing.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It is totally an assumption, but
again, I would have assumed that reading that too. But again, that's why I'm starting to question, the writing of these things. The journalistic approach to a lot of this stuff just seems like, are you reporting on that? Maybe we just got a brief overview of the headlines and if you really want to dig into that, can you find that answer somewhere? I don't know how deep you have to dive to find that answer, right? Because the contract on that loan, you can't read. They're not going to publish that somewhere. That's between the EXIM Bank and the. Again, that's why there's so much. Some things that just kind of sit out there and we don't know what the answers are. They report this and move on, and until there's a problem, we'd have to look back at this. And there might not be a problem for 10 years or 20 years, but what happens if there is? Where do we go to find that answer?
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I don't know. Is it EXIM Bank? Is that a Australia bank, or is
no?
That
it's the U.S.
It's a U.S. bank. Okay.
Yeah. EXIM, U.S. EXIM Bank. So it's that's for funding for importing and exporting. So it's probably the governmental control of part of those imports and exports, but the financing of certain projects.
Yeah.
Because I guess if somebody buys or has a mill in China or Europe or somewhere and they want to sell the steel in the U.S., they're not necessarily financed by the EXIM Bank, to approve those deals.
And in the whole scheme of things too, it doesn't seem like that's a real huge project, but yet it's something to curb the reliability or the reliance upon Chinese rare earth minerals. So it's not going to, completely remove that need for the Chinese rare earth materials, but certainly taking a step in the direction of becoming 100% reliant upon them.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty good size. I don't know how like I said, how big is that mine? How far does it extend? Where is it? I don't know what the mineral sands projects. If anybody has any idea what the mineral sands projects are out there, we could probably do a quick dive on that, an AI dive, and see what it is. But let's do that for next week. Get ready for next week.
You got it right.
All right. So the fourth thing here is the non-ferrous metals. trade volatility and tariff uncertainty dominated the discussions at the Global Recycling Convention. So there was a global recycling convention that talked about all that stuff. And the recyclers are stressing secondary supply chain resilience. What is it? Trade volatility and tariff uncertainty dominated the discussions at the Global Recycling Convention. Recyclers stress secondary supply chain resilience. Secondary supply chain resilience. Primary would be just the recycled material at the junkyards. What's secondary? I don't know what's secondary. Is secondary like electric arc furnaces melting scrap, recycling scrap?
It's a great question. I honestly don't know the answer to that. What the secondary level is for scrap recycling. I don't know.
Looking at the chat, doesn't
That's a
know
good.
his answer.
I mean, it could be. It could be. I mean, that level, the electric arc furnace type users.
Yeah, probably a lot of secondary type. Yeah, but that's one way. I would just assume that. I don't know if that's a primary user of secondary supply chain, or again how that's written. I guess I probably should have looked at that and figured that out before. So then the final point here is the service centers. The U.S. shipments fell 3.2% year over year in September. Well, that's interesting that the U.S. shipments were down 3.2 and the Canadians, that aluminum and tariffs and all that might have settled into where the year over year. So that's a loss in the U.S. The year over year. I didn't know the Canadian market was that stronger, or is it just maybe last year was bad? I don't know. You never can tell. I mean, I can't remember a year ago exactly what happened in September last year.
Well, that's why we're talking about this stuff, to build some continuity into our knowledge of the world market. So, and anybody else out there that has some input, we'd love to hear from you. Yep.
Here to talk about these things. This is just to facilitate the discussion. That's the whole thing. We're facilitating the discussion here about the last week's news, which here we are in the supply chain implications of all this that we've talked about so far is in the steel markets, the short-term price stabilization possible due to production cuts, but end user demand remains soft. That's kind of contradictory to a little bit of information we saw in the carbon flat rolled market this week, wasn't it, Scott?
Absolutely. And as you and I talked about previously, have we kind of reached the bottom level and things are starting to turn around? Because one of the U.S. domestic manufacturers announced a $50 a ton. I think it was a $50 a ton price increase on spot pricing, due to increased order levels and an increase in demand. So
their order book,
hopefully that's indicative of the turn, that we've hit the bottom and we're starting to turn the other way. But obviously the data that we've acquired indicates that the output has dropped. So let's hopefully it's we've hit the bottom and we're going the other way.
Yeah, that's the goal. But
anybody else seeing anything like that out there?
Yeah. See, maybe it could be an inventory adjustment as well. Maybe people haven't been buying for a while based on all the tariffs and things like that. And then they just started buying again a little bit, and everybody started putting a couple of inventory orders back in the books. Maybe the inventory orders aren't necessarily as strong, as they were as the last inventory order that they put in, but it still could be down. But the mills felt that.
And I'm sure. And I'm sure the service center market's going to be very cautious still because, as we've talked about for the past several weeks, is, with the uncertainty with tariffs, the longevity of them, people are being very cautious on placing certainly large inventory purchases, but they do have to make purchases in order to supply their customers with material because business hasn't stopped. I mean, business is still going on. So obviously they have to. It's a juggling act, and I'm.
Yeah, John Deere's still making tractors, but they might not be making 1,000 tractors. They might be making 850 or 700 instead of 1,000 or something.
Right.
So that supplier still
Right.
needs to have the steel in the pipeline, and the mill still needs to be melting that steel for future orders and keeping it. Because I don't know, we've got some supply chains that are from order to being shipped can go. Some of that material needs to be in the pipeline for 4 or 6 months minimum.
I was going to say 4 to 5 months, but 4 to 6 months, easy. Yeah, sure.
By the time you process it all, get it set up and shipped and stored and back and forth to the different functions, get all that. So again, that buying that and so projecting out what's going to be happening 6 months from now, and with uncertainty, it becomes even harder. So it puts more pressure on the buyer there to keep their inventories under control.
But that's what all the service centers are doing. Obviously, they're going out to the customer base, and they're gathering that information and trying to identify, what the outlook is like in the fourth quarter and first quarter of next year. They got to start planning for that. So maybe there is some positive talks out there, and also like we've talked about as well. Some of these shifts in the production with the current administration bringing back some production into this country, that's going to take a little while for that to start to really hit the markets, but that is going to create some demand for products when some of these facilities start getting built, carved facilities and that sort of thing. It's going to increase the demand. So it's not happening now, but looking forward, it's going to make a difference.
Yes, it will. Yeah.
That's the goal anyway. I'm pretty sure.
For some reason, I just was looking at the feed there. It looks like the feed. We're still live on LinkedIn. It looks like it looks like it frozen up for a second, but and YouTube's about the same. Okay, so the restream part of it is pushing it out there. For some reason is locked up. But we won't worry about that now because it's getting pushed out from there. It's still processing. So a couple other supply chain implications there was the critical minerals. The diversification strategies are gaining traction and opportunities for mining and logistics for firms to enter into new partnerships. We saw that's implication from the $200 million loan. And that must be some type of partnership between the U.S. and the Australian government to mine those materials and have that supply chain set up.
Yeah.
I did see something. I thought there was the trade deal with South Korea they just talked about yesterday. That didn't make any of our information our notes here for the podcast. But I did see something. I thought that had something to do with critical minerals as well. I don't know how much. I don't know what minerals South Korea has, but I think there's something.
I don't know. I didn't see that.
Yeah. So another supply chain implication is the recycling and sustainability. The scrap sourcing, which is going to talk about that secondary, secondary, and circular economy policies are now key competitive factors. So I know we've kind of seen that through in the steel business when it went from the melt furnaces to the electric arcs over, in the 80s, 90s. Some of the newer ones were the electric arcs, and they started remelting steel as opposed to just making it straight from iron ore and coke and that kind those blast furnaces.
Right.
What's been going on?
I mean, the market switching to mostly the electric furnaces. I mean, the majority of production is. I mean, it's a lot less. I mean, the costs are lower and it's more efficient.
Right. I guess that's the whole thing about sustainability too. Instead of just taking the stuff out of the earth and digging up the earth all the time and melting it from there, you can just reuse. You raise the buildings and remelt the steel that they made and Same thing with the
Right.
stainless. We started seeing that a lot in the stainless. That was a more recent in the 2000s anyway. It wasn't until the 2000s, because before that, people didn't have stainless steel appliances in their house. It wasn't like all stainless steel appliances. I don't think that started coming around a little later than the other steel structures that we had. I think, so again, you need all the blenders and all the microwaves and the facings and the refrigerators and dishwashers and barbecues and everything.
Right.
There's just so much stainless that sits around and needs to be recycled then. So it seems to start working out a little bit better. And again, it's the more recent times for our lives anyway.
Yeah.
And we've been around a little while. Jeez, what started Sunbelt Steel in 1981?
1981.
Yeah, and we grew up in the business. That's a little side note there. We grew up in the business. Our father was in the steel business, and our grandfather was in the steel business. He started with it was actually the Sharon Hoop Company in the 1920s. And so that's over 100 years ago, somewhere around 100. He was up in Sharon, Pennsylvania, and started working in the steel business way back then. And I guess they were making hoops for washers at that time.
Was it for washers? Oh, okay.
I think it was for washers. Yeah, there's the hoops or whatever. And then it evolved into they started making the billets, and then they started, Sharon Steel's really known, I remember, through at least the 70s and 80s, was the DeFurco took them over. They were a big billet mill. I don't think they processed much. I don't think they rolled those out. 14 ounces.
That's a question I can't really answer. I really don't know their actual capacity or capabilities. They were big, I know that.
Golly, that's a while ago. See, look at that. They're starting to age myself there a little bit.
Yeah.
I need to put some hair and color that up a little bit there.
Grecian formula.
Yeah, somebody was nice.
I don't have any hair, so it can't turn gray. So that's what somebody said to me the other day. He says, "Gosh, how come you don't have any gray hair?" Because I don't have any hair.
I can answer that question for you.
It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're kind of
digressing.
So
the last point here on the supply chain implications is the regional divergence, where North America service centers may face mixed conditions where inventory and pricing strategies need regional alignment.
That's an ongoing situation all the time, right?
Yeah, you see, when you purchase primary material and you've got it sitting in Atlanta and you've got an abundance of the material in Atlanta and you've purchased just as much for Chicago, but Chicago market's consuming it, do you move that inventory or do you buy new inventory? So you can take that inventory out of your Atlanta Southeast locations and put it up you can get rid of it up in the Midwest.
That's why those inventory control purchasing agents and all those kind of people get paid the big bucks, is to figure all that stuff out, right?
Yep. Lost a couple orders in that. You say they always like to look at the current mill pricing to see what it takes to get mill orders to Chicago, and then compare that to what their inventory costs are in the Atlanta inventory, and then is it better to move it up there or buy new stuff and let it sit around, or anyway. So those are divergences. They were seeing that with the changes in the declining business conditions. But it's funny, we're getting some mixed signals. Again, a couple of the domestic steel mills, the U.S. steel mills, are raising their prices and citing increased demand, but yet we saw month over month. So maybe the October numbers, we'll see that when the October numbers come out. We'll see that. These are September numbers, so they're lagging a month. So maybe we'll see in the last 4 to 6 weeks.
Let's hope that as we continue these conversations, that we start talking about the positive upturn in business, as opposed to the worldwide production dropping.
Right. So we've kind of covered the stuff here. I don't know. There's a couple of discussion starters, but we've kind of gone over it. I guess we can look at them and see if there's anything here we can further expand on. So it says, how should steel mills adjust production plans amid weaker global demand? That's been an ongoing saga for my whole life. Seeing how mills do that,
I
you
mean,
can't get
we've
together
kind
with
of
other
already
mills.
touched, yeah, we've kind of already touched on that too, is that
Right.
it's a constant evaluation on what to do.
Yeah, because another thing is if global demand's weak, some markets may be a little stronger than others, but again, with the tariffs and stuff like that, you have to adjust that as well. So where is your output going? Is it going, I know we've always seen that in the mills is there's usually a shipping radius that happens, they become not so competitive when a mill's within, they got to have a shipping range of X, 100 miles, 50 miles, or is it a global thing where you can afford to ship that material out of the Midwest Chicago into China? There's a lot of freight that goes in there.
With the world market that we're in, that has kind of changed a little bit, but it's back in the day when we were just working with domestic mills, it was pretty much territorially. They would produce their product and ship it within a certain range of their mill, but
because you got to get the next closest mill is going to come back the other way, and they're going to fight it, and that's for that's for standard gauges 48 wide material mill edge,
Right.
But when you start talking about alloys or maybe widths that are a little wider than normal, that some mills can't produce a wider width.
Sure.
Or gauge controls and things like that some mills have and don't have. So there are some competitive to compete with the next closest mill.
Yeah.
On standard, again, standard average grades or whatever, grades and sizes. So,
yep. Yeah. And that's, not all mills make the same stuff as we've, experienced over the years. And as you just indicated, some mills they can go up to 72 wide, not too many of them. Some can go to 60, some only go to 48. And some just make low carbon steel, some make mid to high carbon, some make high carbon and alloy. But, with Cleveland Cliffs idling that Riverdale facility, it did a little bit of a void in the marketplace on high carbon and alloy producers. So... And I know we've got some customers that have been affected by that as well. So,
yeah, please reach out.
Yeah.
So the other question is can that U.S. Australia rare earth partnerships meaningfully reduce strategic risk? And then you got 2026 is coming around pretty quickly, and the same thing we were talking about before, you still have shipping time. If you need to get it from Australia to here, you still have a 6 week shipping time. So that's 2026 right now if you bring it out of the ground yesterday. So again, I don't know how meaningfully or the strategic risk. I would assume that it probably would, but again, I don't know how far along they are. If they haven't even bought equipment to start mining it yet, that equipment could be a long lead time as well. So,
if they're just working on getting the financing set up right now, I think they're at the very infancy stages of that.
Well, it could be financed already, just an expansion or something. Who knows? Or just
could be funding. Yeah, good point.
Buying that material or just having that in the pipeline, the supply chain.
Right.
So it didn't necessarily say that they're funding it right from a grassroots, build.
Correct. Good point. Yep. Yeah.
But again, there's too that I don't know that particular sands thing. I'm assuming they're just talking about mining. They're not talking about smelting or refining. They're talking about
just getting it out of the ground.
Right. Stocking it and then shipping that. And again, I don't know what the critical minerals, if that's easily shipped or barge or how they do that. I don't know how they do that. Again, with the sea bearing salt water, does it have to be protected? I would assume some of it would need to be. So I don't know if it's just tarped or if it's because of ocean spray. I wouldn't think it. But anyway, each mineral is probably a little different.
Yep, exactly.
So what role will recyclers play in stabilizing non-ferrous metal supply? I think it's always been part of the equation. Just like I said, depending on where the electric arcs, it's always been recyclers have always been and I say recyclers, the junkyards and the suppliers of the
scrap metal. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what the difference between somebody that actually, because who's recycling the material? Is it the electric arc furnace that's taking the scrap and recycling it?
Yeah, you probably could get into a whole deep conversation about that. I mean, dividing the aluminum cans. So would that be the scrap dealer? I would assume that is. They're helping in the beginning stages of the recycling process. So they're a part of the whole recycling process.
Right. Management against uncertain demand trends. The bigger the service center, the harder they fall. I mean, it's like we just said before. I mean, if you're just a regular service center and you have one location, how do you manage that? An uncertain thing. You have your local market only to provide material for, as opposed to the guy that's got branches all over the world or all over the country and can move material from one regional center to another. They can move that based on.
Yeah, and I think there's also too a lot of. I think the mills, and I'm not any particular product that I'm speaking about, but I think in certain products, there's a lot of the mills that are working with the larger distributors on helping them shorten their lead times by, having, and that's one thing that we've done over the years as well, is helping put together like blanket orders. So the mill can lock in their production and they release it on a as needed basis within certain time periods or whatever. There's a lot of that going on. It used to be the mill used to just take an order and make it and ship it. But I think that the mills now are getting a little more flexible and working together with the larger distributors and not necessarily a make and hold inventory, but somewhat.
I guess, if you can help me plan my production a little bit better, you can offset some of the, because they conglomerate put orders together, consolidate orders from multiple places and try to plan their production. So
right. And that's kind of something that we've been doing so we love doing that. So, there's a lot of that going on.
Sounds good. Well, with that kind of wraps up our discussion for the week of this week's news. Appreciate everybody for showing up. We're going to wrap it up with Jim Glenn at steelrep.com and Scott Glenn at steelrep.com. See, that's right there. Over there yonder. Scott Glenn over there. Jim Glenn here. And that's two N's on the Glenn. And we also have our community for busy professionals to network together on the steel business, which is the steelguys.steelrep.com. And one thing we haven't mentioned yet is our new relationship, new sponsor, that'll be operational spring of next year, somewhere spring to early summer, shipping material. So if anybody's interested, it's a trade-friendly country. It's being built in a trade-friendly country to the U.S. And it's short lead times. Actually, the lead times from the mill are probably going to be within 2 week shipping time. So,
and that's leading into fitting into what I was just talking about. Is just we are looking for distributors. It's in infancy stages for sure right now, but we are going to be looking for distributors who would like to partner with us on that product.
Yeah, I know it's more of a toddler phase instead of not an infancy phase, because we're talking like 4 to 5 months before production starts. So trial orders and stuff like that, and getting on board and getting approval process. Anybody's got an approval process and stuff. It's we're ready to go on all that stuff, and we're working on all that stuff. So if anybody has an interest, and we're going to also be putting together. So watch out, we're going to be putting together a newsletter to keep everybody briefed with the updates on the growth and the build. So if you're interested in learning that, reach out to Scott or I to learn more about that. We'll get you on a newsletter capability, and then again, we'd love to hear from you on that if you need anything.
And we're also going to be putting out some surveys. So if anybody's watching this and they see it, we would certainly appreciate your assistance in filling out any surveys that we throw out there, because we're trying to gather market information on how we can best serve the market.
Yeah. It's a 1/2 through 4 inch to begin with, and then we're going to look at increasing to 6 and 8 inch, depending on, again, if we get the right responses and some interest. We could actually do that now. So keep an eye out for that.
Yes. Yeah.
We're looking to do that. Again, you'll see something from Scott or Jim. So emails from us that we're going to be trying to get there, and some posts on our LinkedIn sent. Again, it's just an easy newsletter to tell you what's going on with it's nothing else. It's just the build of the mill. It's going to be short, and the newsletter isn't going to be a 16-page newsletter. It's going to be probably the memo style, with the updates of what we have going on, the changes in the as we're getting mills bolted down to the floor, and the rolls brought in, and the overhead cranes put in, and material's going to start to show up. And, we're going to have the scalp start to show up, so we can start rolling and welding. But anyway, with that, thank you very much for joining us here today. We appreciate your time, and I guess we're ready to sign off and say thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. We'll be in touch.
See you, Scott. Thanks.